So over the last several months, I've spent countless hours e-scouting for different WMAs to target various species in the fall months, from whitetail, elk, black bear, and a little bit of everything in between. We've identified some really sweet areas, and we've set up waypoints, and I've looked through to identify various things like food, water, and shelter on the landscape. So I'm finally out here, boots on the ground. Hunting season is just around the corner. So we're out here, we're gonna try to look for some old sign from the year before, set up some trail cameras, and just see what we saw on the map and see if it kind of is what we're looking for. So right now we've walked out into the bush into what it looked like a ridge system on iHunter, and sure enough, when I'm in here, it is a ridge. It's kind of a rocky point that there's not many trees. And just walking in here, there's elk rubs and signs of bears ripping up anthills. So it's definitely a pretty gamey area that they use for a natural corridor. So this was a waypoint I had set, and I've got a few more down the line. We're going to continue on and see if we can find some real good pinch points, real good areas where there's trails coming onto this ridge system into the low-lying areas where there's likely bedding. And I look into the bush here, there's lots of good grass growing, so there's a lot of feed for the deer and the elk here. So I'd imagine once you drop into the cool low-lying areas, there's going to be some pretty cool bedding areas here. And they're going to use these areas of ridges like they're the paths of least resistance. So animals like humans, you don't want to be trudging through the bush non-stop. So you're going to find these little areas of least resistance, and you're gonna often find great game trails. So we're gonna try to identify the food, the water, the shelter, and it's gonna really set us up in a good position. I've got a few trail cameras with me. I'm gonna set them up on points of interest, and they can do the scouting while I'm at home. So let's get to it. So we've been just following game trails down this ridge here, and I just found this here. What this is an anthill that a bear has destroyed in digging up and eating the ants out of it. So it's a sign, another great sign that there's a bear in the area, and this is reasonably recent because often those ants can fix the scarring that the bears did to the hill in a hurry. So you can tell that a bear has recently been here, and again, a very good sign that this could be a good bear hunting spot come fall or spring. So I've just been walking along a game trail along this ridge here. I found this area here that's all flattened out, and just behind me there's an anthill that got tore up too. So to me, this is a sign of a black bear kind of sitting here feeding a little bit on the grass, digging up the anthills. So it's a sign of some recent bear activity, and if I was a bedding man, this would be a good place to start for a fall bear hunt. So we've been working our way down the ridge here on a game trail, and here there's a game trail right behind me, another one right here. There's one just off to the side here, and they're all following north down this line. So it's a really good convergence of trails, and lo and behold, there's a really good sized elk rub from years past right here. And the way you can tell it's an elk rub is, you can see here the bark is stripped cleanly off of it, and then as you go further up the tree, there's more marks from where the antlers have rubbed against it, and you can see how high it is. That's how you know it's an elk. A whitetail rub will generally only be maybe 3 feet, 4 feet off the ground, and often on smaller trees than this. So the best way to tell if it's a fresh rub or an older rub is just, you can see here, this is all grayed out. There's some sun exposure to it. That's likely one from last year or maybe the year before. A new one would have a real yellow golden color of the inside of the trees, freshly scraped, maybe even a little green on the sides from the fresh bark being damaged. So yes, I'd say this is an older rub, and hopefully we'll run into a newer one so I can show you what that looks like too. So finding an old rub can be really important to your scouting before season. It's an indication that the elk or the deer were there during the rut season. So for elk throughout September, and for a whitetail, October, November, it's a sign that the animals are there and they're using this area as a rutting area. And it's definitely a good tool to use for your scouting, you're in the right area. So to me, this is just like a really good natural funnel for wildlife. So I'm going to set up a trail camera on a tree here and just see what kind of critters walk by. So there's a whole bunch of options of trees around here, and I've picked this one right here to set the camera up because this is a north-facing tree. There's another real good one that's kind of a south-facing tree, and I try to stay away from putting the camera up on a tree that's facing to the south because the sun will shine on the camera, sometimes trip it off a whole bunch of times in a day, or if an animal walks by, you might not even be able to tell what it is because the sun is so shiny there. So we're gonna set it up here. Setting the camera up at a 90 degree on a trail, it's just the animal's gone by so fast, sometimes you only get the tail end of the animal or maybe nothing at all. So if you kind of angle down the trail, you got a better chance of getting that whole animal in frame. I've got the camera set up kind of on a 45 degree angle along the trail. Another thing you gotta keep an eye on is some of the underbrush. Look at where the sensors are on the trail camera, and whenever you see some little bit of brush, it's good to knock them down just a little bit, because as the wind blows, that'll sometimes trigger that camera. So the more effort you put into setting up the camera the first time, the less dud photos and videos you're gonna get when you're checking the cameras up in a couple weeks here and seeing what kind of critters are on it. So yeah, a big thing is just clearing up that brush, making sure there's no obstructions in front of the camera, and giving it a clear shot down the trail so you're gonna get the most of that animal. So another thing to think of once you got the brush on the ground cleared is the types of branches that are hanging above this tree, because maybe when you set the camera up, the branches aren't in front of the camera, but when it gets windy, they can blow in front. So it's good to just, clear up any sort of obstructions that could come from the tree. And again, just keep a really clear shot down the trail for that trail camera. So we've continued our way down the ridge, and I've just spotted a trail that's kind of heading off at a 90 degree angle off the ridge, and it's going into a low-lying area. And that area likely is holding water in the spring, but as the summer months go on, the water dissipates. There's gonna be a cool mossy bottom and not a whole bunch of underbrush, but it's just enough to give them protection from the elements and protection from any potential predators. Often on both sides of the ridges, there'll be these low-lying areas, and it's one thing to think about which way the wind direction is going. It's likely they're gonna be set up in a way that they can smell what's walking down the ridge from either side. So if the wind's blowing from this way, the elk and deer will likely be bedded in the low-lying area on the downwind side, and that's just so that they can identify whatever's crossing the ridge, whether it be another elk or a deer or a potential predator, and it's just how they protect themselves from any potential threats. So we've just continued through the WMA, and we got on the edge of an opening here, and this is an example of a fresh elk rub. So you can see in contrast to the last rub, this is a lot more gold in color. It's instead of grayed out from the sun bleaching. You can see up here, this is pretty green, so you can see that's freshly been rubbed. There's also some other signs of trees beside it. It had leaves on it this year, so they're getting a little bit crunchy now, so it's been probably maybe 4 or 5 days since this rub. So for a fresh whitetail rub, it'll look exactly the same as this, but like I said, they're gonna be much lower on a tree and often a little bit smaller trees, maybe more like a tree this size or just a little bit bigger. But this is an awesome sign of fresh activity. I'm gonna drop a waypoint here and put that in the memory bank for when I have an elk tag in my pocket. But this is a great sign, fresh elk rub. We know there's some in the area. So we just wrapped up our hike on the ridge, and we found some really good travel quarters. We found some food source, some bedding, some sign from previous ruts. But one thing I was really curious about was the swamp just on the backside of the ridges, just to see if there was a good amount of water for them to drink from. So we come out to the edge of the swamp here. We're not even in the middle of it, and I'm already standing in water, so it's a good sign that it's real nice and wet out here, and it's a great water source for them. So I've identified this area to have like the 3 core pillars that any elk or deer needs, and that's food, water, and bedding. So all those areas I identified in the preseason scouting, I left waypoints on the iHunter app. I downloaded the cacheable satellite imagery, and now I got boots on the ground, and I've efficiently scouted this area. I've identified the 3 core things that I wanted to. So I've identified this place as water. I'm gonna open up my iHunter app. I'm gonna drop a waypoint, say this is water, and I'm gonna be able to look back on the iHunter app when I'm home, and I'll be able to look at, kind of triangulate where the food, water, bedding is, and get a real good idea of where these travel corridors are, and go from there. So I'm really happy with how the scouting session has gone, and I think this will be a place that I'll try to target this fall. I'm gonna leave a couple trail cameras out in various areas and let them sit for a couple weeks, come back and check them, and see what kind of wildlife we have out here.